Welcome to Anything But Ordinary. Tonight's topic is Haunted Montana. I am your host, Spooky, and here is the most awesome host, Raven.
Thanks. We just want to say welcome, everybody. Glad to be back doing shows. Sorry about the YouTube issue, but we did get to stream on Ustream for tonight. There might be a little audio issue with Spooky's end because she is having a storm and it's kind of affecting her Skype, but we'll do the best that we can. So, yeah. Welcome to our Haunted Montana show. You guys know this is kind of like a reoccurring theme that we do. We want to kind of hit up every state. And obviously we're going to do other states again because I don't care. Whatever state you kind of want to pick, they all tend to have too many locations that you cannot fit in a 2-hour show, you know. I don't know. Why don't we'll just get started? Hopefully everybody's kind of moved over. So we'll just kind of go right into it. What do you think, Spooky?
Yeah, let's just go right into it.
Yeah, there's no intermission tonight either. We're just going to trudge through since you guys waited for so long for us. But the first one I'm going to do, it's called Little Bighorn Battlefield. Now, that's located near the Crow Agency in Montana. Now, a lot of you know this, but for a few of you who don't, I'm just going to kind of give a little history on the area so then you know why it has so much paranormal activity. But the Little Bighorn Battlefield was the site of one of the bloodiest battles back then between our government and the natives, but it was between basically General Custer and his men and then the Lakota Sioux and the northern tribes of the Cheyenne. And it occurred during the 1830s when the United States federal government, you know, basically passed that law where it was called the Indian Removal Act, which they basically forced like all the Native Americans from their land and away from any, you know, wherever the European populace were kind of taking over. But the Battle of the Little Bighorn was like the most successful action fought by the American Native Indians at that time against the United States Army in the West. It was part of the campaign of 1876 in the effort by the United States government to force the Sioux tribes onto the reservations. And during these mass, I guess you call it like migrations, some of them went voluntarily where others were basically forced, which we know by the Trail of Tears. Remember that?
No, I don't remember it, but I know.
Not because you were there, but I mean,
I'm not that old.
The bits and pieces of history that we were allowed to know of it, but you know, but that was during the 1850s. You know, then finally the United States Congress passed like this Indian Appropriations Act. Yeah, which created those native reservations where they're kind of forced onto. So this is what caused a lot of tension between the natives and the Europeans that were coming in, and there was a lot of different skirmishes or fights that were going on, which is understandable. I mean, you'd be annoyed if somebody's coming in and trying to force you into a small lot of land and said, you can't go anywhere but stay here, you know. But they were upset because it was taking away their ancestral land, you know, and they'd lived there for years, and you know, they were given these kind of less desirable parcels of land that weren't really good to establish anything on. You know what I mean? So it's basically a forced eviction. God, I can't even talk because of all the stuff we were going through. But the reason why they wanted all this land is because they discovered gold and all these really plentiful resources that they wanted. So, of course, they're going to push them off. But anyway, this caused a lot of tension between the government and the natives. And some of them at the time decided they were going to refuse to leave, and they missed the deadline to move into the reservations, which of course led to many of these massacres between the Army and, you know, Custer and his 7th Cavalry, which led up to right here at the Little Bighorn, you know?
Well, this is also known as Custer's Last Stand, and a lot of people don't realize this, but the Little Bighorn was actually partly in the Black Hills, which, as you said before, there was gold discovered.
Yeah, that's totally why they were going it. But anyway, the battle happened between the U.S. Cavalry and the Lakota Sioux and the northern tribes of the Cheyenne on June 25th and the 26th of 1876. And the 7th Cavalry, which had like 30 officers, 586 soldiers, 33 native scouts, and 20 like regular like civilian employees.
Yeah.
And there was also Sioux and Lakota warriors that were under the leadership of, I think it was Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse.
Right.
Which were all fighting in this little area at this time. Well, Custer's had 263 soldiers die fighting, several thousand native warriors, and I think this is the part that's hard to tell because nobody really knows for a fact how many Native Americans died, but they were estimating somewhere between 37 up to 100 Native Americans that were killed and or wounded during this battle skirmish, you know what I mean, between them. But irregardless, many lives were affected and lost due on all sides because of this Indian Removal Act. But the natives' victory was kind of short duration because in the spring of 77, both tribes, including Crazy Horse, were constantly being under siege by the government soldiers, and they were almost literally starved out. So they finally surrendered and then went to the confinement of those reservations. But before they were forced, the Cheyenne and the Lakota tribes managed to remove the native bodies and the wounded from the fields before General Terry and his troops arrived for to help relieve Custer and his soldiers. But the soldiers who ended up dying there, their remains were scattered all across the fields, and they were basically stripped of their clothing. They said they were mutilated by the natives, and a lot of them ended up not being identified, so they were kind of buried where they laid. So when you go here, you'll see all these markers all over the place, and it kind of is humbling because it just shows you where all these people died in battle right there, so there was a lot of blood spilled all over the place. But in 1879, the little Bighorn Battlefield became a designated national cemetery, and in 1881, this memorial was erected over the mass grave of the 7th Cavalry and the U.S. Native Scouts and other civilians that were killed. But in the 1940s, the battlefield was transferred to that of the National Park Service. And
it used to be called Custer Battlefield National Monument, and it was changed to the Little Bighorn National Monument in the 1990s because of how many viewed mistreatment of the Native Americans during the westward expansion years. And they had a Native memorial created to honor the Cheyenne, the Lakota Sioux, lame white man, and noisy walking warriors, Long Road and Dog's Backbone. Isn't that quite a name for tribes? And all the tribes that died defending their way of life at that battle. What a lot of people don't realize is one of the reasons that Custer took this particular assignment was because Custer was sadistic. He loved killing Indians. I've been to this battlefield, and it's like Raven said, it's kind of sad because all of the soldiers are buried where they fell.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty intense for a lot of people who go there because of things that they were experienced. But the buried soldiers' bodies, they found them at one point in the late 1800s, and then they dug up a lot of them and then moved them and kind of put them all together near where Custer's body was located, close to the top of the hill, which now is where stands that one memorial with all like the U.S. soldiers who fought that battle. But they left the markers where each body they dug up that they did find, and the other markers, there's still some bodies. I'm sure they don't know 100% where they're at, but there's also red granite marker where it's placed where several native warriors fell. But these markers, like I said, they're scattered across the whole battlefield, and they said that over 400,000 visitors come to see this each year, and according to the stories from the visitors and the park employees, they tell of ton of paranormal experiences. They have encounters of both native and soldier spirits that have been seen and heard while they're visiting multiple areas of this area. Employees even by people, and also, people who kind of live near the area on the outskirts of the field and section, they're actually having paranormal activity happening in their homes and businesses
Right.
and stuff as well. Now, many claim to have heard, like, disembodied, like, moaning and screaming, like people just like in agony, suffering, like you would if you were shot or stabbed or whatever,
Right.
While they're walking just through these fields visiting, they heard sounds of horse galloping and grunting. There was a visitor that claimed while they were walking the grounds, somehow they flashed back in time and was actually witnessing the battle taking place all around them. And they could hear and smell it as though it was actually occurring right then and there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that happened to another place we were talking about. Remember, somebody was visiting a Civil War old building that was used for a hospital, and they went down to the elevator, and when the elevator opened, they saw the same type of scene taking place from back there.
I think, wasn't that like Gettysburg?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it was.
I think it was. It was the Civil War battle, and the only one and we did a show on it, and the only one I can think of right now is Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's another person, and they shared their story when they were near the battle ridge, that they watched soldiers and natives actually fighting. They saw almost like a reenactment of an imprint, of these paranormal spectral beings carrying on the same thing that happened back in the 1800s today. And they were so disturbed by what they saw, they basically took off and ran to the visitor center, and they told the employees what was occurring. I don't know what the employees are going to do, but like, hey, ghost, don't do that. You're, upsetting our visitors. What are they going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's also several park employees that told of encounters. One was sitting out in their car at night near the Bighorn River next to the field, and they stated that they saw two native warrior spirits sitting atop of their horses up on the bluff, and they were on the opposite side of the battlefield fence where it's basically you're not supposed to cross over, so they were inside the land where people aren't supposed to go into.
Right.
And they claimed that these Native Americans were dressed in their full war and painted, outfits and feathers. During the time they had one guy, I think they said, had their hair in braids and stuff, but they were carrying shields and one had a bow. And one native stood up in their saddle and they looked down in the direction of that employee's car. And so they knew, it's almost like they knew that person was there. And this was an employee. She was a Native American who was having experiences while she was, working for the national park. But there's another story I was reading was from somebody named Miss Hope, who was an intern for the park, and she was staying in an apartment at the edge of the Battleground Cemetery. And one evening while she was resting on her couch, she said she woke up to this man sitting in a chair across from her. And he had like this short hair and kind of like the old handlebar mustache like they did back in the day. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And she said his eyes were like large with fear. And she said he sat there and just kind of stared at her, and she stared at him for a while, and then he just vanished right in front of her eyes. And then the next day she spotted like this photo at the visitor center, and she said it looked just like this guy. I think his name was Second Lieutenant Benjamin Hotchkins. I think that's how this guy, she said his name or whatever. But she didn't even know who this is. And like she woke up, looked, and saw this guy, and pretty detailed because he stared at her for a while. And then when she went back working the visitor center, she happened to see that man's photo. I mean, that would kind of creep me out.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Crow Agency, where this battlefield is located, it's actually it's a kind of the name of a stop in Montana. There's not much there because it's actually part of the Crow Indian Reservation. So I can see where a lot of these Native American apparitions would appear.
Another active place in this area is this 2-story stone house located in the middle of the battleground fields. Now, this stone building was built in 1894 for the purpose of the cemetery groundskeeper, Now, many natives used to call this, the person that stayed there, they used to call him the spirit herder, because they believed back in that day, in 1894, that it was this person's job to actually keep the spirits from leaving the monument area. Well, now this stone building is now the White Swan Memorial Library to this day, but it has like a historian office inside, and I guess it has like a couple conferences room, and then the lower level was once used to house bodies awaiting burial in the cemetery there, because they do bury like soldiers and stuff to this day there too. Like, you know, we have those huge national cemeteries for our men and women who and our veterans.
Right.
They have one of those there too. So they were.
I was thinking there was a national cemetery near this.
Mm-hmm. So they were using the lower level at one time to house the bodies until they were ready for burial during that time. But before it became the White Swan Library, it was used briefly as apartments for the summer employees for the national park, but it was closed during the winter months. So during that time, stories from employees were sharing their encounters at the stone building. Now, one staff worker told of walking home one winter night, which this building's supposed to be shut down for the winter. Now, when they were walking home to their place, they were cutting through the cemetery, they spotted that the lights were turned on in the upstairs apartments of this stone building. So, of course, they went to open the door, and they couldn't get in. They couldn't even budget or whatever. So they went home, or to the area where you're supposed to get the keys or whatever. And then when they came back, somehow all of a sudden all the lights were turned off. You know, but I guess that happened a lot. You know, many times people would continually, during the winter months, find these lights being turned on and off when the place is all locked up. But people have claimed also to have seen a spirit of a woman descending the stairs of this stone building, and that she kind of interacted with a lot of the employees that happened to stay there off and on during the summer times. But there's a story of this ranger who was spending several nights there, and one night he claimed that he actually felt someone sit down at the edge of the bed, and it kind of startled him, so he reached for his firearm that was on the nightstand, which makes sense, you know, like, oh, you know, yeah, you don't know who's coming in or whatever. And when he looked over, that's when he saw this torso of a soldier with their head and their legs missing, gliding across the room, and this half-body ghost just disappeared through the wall into another room. I mean, that would kind of disturb me a little bit. I mean,
that one would disturb me.
All you see is the mid-torso just kind of floating through, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
You know, but I'm like, I don't even know. How would you even react to that, you know?
Well, I would get up and leave. If he wants my apartment, he can have it.
Yeah, but there's stories of doorknobs moving, door opening and closing on their own. There's strange disembodied footsteps constantly heard, as well as voices and screaming, all in this one building. Now, the visitor center, that's another building that seems to be a hot spot for active, because the building is located at the bottom of the Last Stand Hill, and that's where, like, the bloody skirmish totally happened, and Custer died up there, and what have you. But it's said that after visiting hours, oftentimes, you know, because the doors are locked and stuff, and the staff are just there cleaning up, doing what they gotta do for the night before the next day, they're constantly hearing these disembodied voices. Lights are turning on and off on their own. And this one staff member, while they were in the museum, because that's like down in the basement where you do a tour and they show you all the different like Civil War stuff and what occurred here and stuff. But after doing like one of their presentations with a few visitors, they went to bring the equipment back to the storage room, and they noticed this figure, or like this person, standing in a darker corner, and the person looked like a soldier. So at first, this employee just assumed it was probably like another staff member trying to play a trick on them. So they acted as though they didn't see the person, and they kind of just walked right past this soldier. And as they approached to enter like the audio storage room to put the equipment away, that's when they saw this soldier dressed in like a brown shirt. They were wearing like this black, like, you know where they put all the bullets in?
Cartridge belt?
Yeah. So they were totally in full gear of what you'd look like back then, you know? And it was across
Right.
their chest. And the person stepped out of the shadows, this figure as a soldier, they stepped out of the shadows and they walked down the hall and then they walked through a locked door into another inventory room. Well, of course, this freaked out that employee. So they put the items away and they had to back up stairs, which basically I think they just threw the stuff and ran. You know what I mean?
Yeah, really.
I'll gently put the equipment away. I doubt it. They're just like, F it, I'm out
They
of here.
threw it in, slammed the door, and ran.
Yeah. I don't know how it got messy in there, but, you know, it wasn't my problem. But there's also stories of even Custer's spirit having been seen late at night at the visitor center. I mean, people have ran into seeing Custer, you know, and he had a distinct look. He had that blonde hair, which a lot of people thought he had long hair at the time, but he actually cut his hair short. But he did have his mustache.
Right. His little mustache and his little chin whiskers.
His whatever, but you could definitely tell Custer apart than everybody else, and they actually didn't scalp him. I don't know if it was out of respect because of his warrior status or what, but he wasn't actually mutilated, or supposedly they reported that all these people were mutilated. We don't know because history can be changed to make one side look better than the other. We know that,
Right.
but there's other stories. You know, when visitors as well as employees, you know, even during the day, they're seeing apparitions. People are actually being touched. They hear moans and screams.
When I visited this place, I was besieged by spirits as soon as I walked on the grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went through the tour and everything, it was like they would not leave me alone. And after the tour, matter of fact, it got so bad, I was going to leave in the middle of the tour, but for some reason I stuck with it. Anyway, after the tour, one of the tour guides walked up to me, and she was Native American. And matter of fact, there's a lot of Native Americans that work there.
Well, that's because they should have their
Well,
their
it's
story
right on the
told
Crow
too.
Indian Reservation, yeah.
But they're there to help
So-
tell the truths of their stories.
Exactly. But anyway, one of the tour guides walked up to me, and she told me, she says, "How did you stand it?" And I looked at her, you know, and she says, she says, "There had to have been 30 of them around you." She could see them too.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
it's very active just because of how much blood was spilled there.
Right. But it just, and she told me that every single day that there's a tour through there or people come to visit, that they get at least 5 stories of people that have seen things on these grounds and in these buildings. So it's something that happens all the time.
Yeah. When places like that, it's pretty intense, you know. But they were talking about, you know, like I said, people were seeing stuff during the day and night. They were hearing it not just in these buildings, but they were they were also experiencing it all over the grounds. You could
Right.
feel things. You could smell, because you know what. Blood and gangrene, all that has like a certain smell, and it's awful.
Yes,
I mean,
it
they were
does.
smelling things like that. They were smelling cigarette smoke. They were hearing horses. They were hearing native cries. They were hearing the war cries. You know, when they were walking the battlegrounds, people were seeing reenactment of these spirits going through what they were going through at the time, but they weren't solid. They were still see-through. So that's quite of a freaky effect, you know what I mean, for somebody to even come into. But
this place is highly active.
Yeah, I totally want to, when I can, I would like to go
as
out there.
As soon as you walk on the grounds, you can just feel it's so, the air is just so thick that you can just almost cut it. I mean, and it just stays that way the whole time you're there. And as soon as you walk off, you know, all of a sudden, you know, everything is just normal again. But everything is just so intense on it. But this was such an intense battle.
Mm-hmm. Well, people were fighting for their freedoms, not wanting to be shut. I mean, because at the time, basically, a reservation is like a FEMA camp. They're forcing you and your family out of what you've been doing your whole life.
And these Native Americans got tired of Custer, and they were going to put a stop to him, and they did.
Yeah.
I mean, they were determined. They were going to go whoop his butt, and they did it.
Well, they were trying to make it. It wasn't so much against him, but against they were
Well,
trying to stand up for the rights.
He stood
what the government was doing
at the time. At this time, he stood for what they were fighting against, and they were trying to fight to keep their way of life. They were trying to fight for their freedom, and he was out in this area. He led a lot of campaigns. He would lead campaigns against women and children and old men that were camped along rivers, and he would just go in there and just slaughter them. Like I said, he actually loved doing this.
Well,
people don't realize, what the history books don't tell you is just exactly how sadistic and bloodthirsty Custer was. And he stood for what they were fighting against, because he was the one there doing the government's work.
Right. Well, there's some people who enjoy this stuff and some people who didn't, and maybe on both sides. But I know, like, history was changed a little, because when you do hear the stories of the natives when they're telling their side, they didn't just see them and then go after them. They actually were doing their daily activity, what they're supposed to do. Their horses out were a certain way, families were bathing in the river, others were setting, doing their daily chores and stuff. And they didn't know that Custer and all these people were up there. And the history says, look, they knew, they went after him, attacked him. That's not really what happened. That Custer and those guys started to come, and then a couple natives saw it, and they came back getting all the horses, telling everybody, they're coming. And half the men, women, and children were actually in the river bathing and doing a lot of stuff. So, we don't get the full truth all the time on history, so it's always good for us to research our own. It's good to learn stuff, but it's also good to, go beyond and say, is what I'm being taught 100% truthful? So it's, I like, school is great, but I always wanted to make sure everything I was learning was like 100%, more. Cause
the majority of the Native American people during all of these battles and everything were actually defending themselves.
Well,
but when you read the history book, they were
ruthless, bloody, soulless
bloody
killers,
savages,
which is not true. Yeah,
which is absolutely not true.
There may have been one or two people like that on both sides, because you got people who are totally into killing. That's why we have serial killers, spree killers, and whatever like that. But
right.
But a lot of history's changed a certain way because they wanted to justify why they were hurting up people and taking away their freedoms. But anyway, we're getting off track with the paranormal. But it's because of those type of emotions, I think. It's because of the emotions of the guys on the other side. They probably didn't like killing. They probably felt horrible doing it, but they were doing their job type of thing. But you got all these different mixed emotions. You have all these people losing their lives over extreme things. And I can see why there might be like an imprint on this land of these events reoccurring, or people not being able to move on because of the emotions that they still had tied in with what was occurring at that time. Maybe they died, didn't get to say goodbye or do something, so for whatever reason they're still there. You know what I mean? So maybe that's why people are feeling this energy, or there's this imprint on that land, or these people aren't moved on just because of how much bloodshed and everything else, But
exactly,
I want to go here. I want to check it out, not just because of the paranormal stuff, but also just because I enjoy historic things like this too. But
right, history is my thing. I just love history, especially American history.
Why don't you go on to the next one too? So.
Okay, the old Montana State Prison. It's located at 1106 Main Street in Deer Lodge, Montana. Now, because of rampant lawlessness and vigilante-style form of justice in this newly formed Montana territory, the U.S. Congress allotted $40,000 to Montana for the express purpose of constructing a territorial prison in 1867. Now, Deer Lodge was chosen as the site of this facility on November 19th in 1867, but the construction was not began until June 2nd of 1870. Now, one of the interesting things about the prison is this prison was built entirely by prison labor. The original plans for the building called for this structure that was 3 tiers high with 14 cells on each tier, but unfortunately, due to the difficulty of acquiring materials and the cost to ship these materials and the expense of hiring labor at the time, the new building only had one tier, and on July 2nd of 1871, the first 9 prisoners to be incarcerated entered this facility. Well, it didn't take long. It only took a single month, and the prison was overcrowded. In June of 1874, now in the beginning, though, before June of 1874, there were only 28 cells, and each cell was holding 4 prisoners. So that's how crowded this place got. And they even had them sleeping outside on the grounds. In June of 1874, they built another tier with 14 cells, and they also put up a 12-foot board fence, because of the neighbors. Now, the prison's population just continued to grow, so Congress allocated more money for the construction of more cells. But unfortunately, the soft brick that they were using just could not support any more weight. So instead, this money went into an administration building with guard barracks, a warden's office, and a visitor's reception. And finally, in 1885, there was more money provided, and the prison was built. It became a 3-story cell block. Or there was a 3-story cell block with 42 double occupancy cells, which was completed in 1886. Now, Montana became a state in March of 1890, so the prison was turned over to this new state of Montana. And one of the few, like I said before, this was a prison built entirely by inmate labor. And it's also one of the few prisons in the country to have been done so. Anyway, throughout this prison's history, it was plagued with constant overcrowding, insufficient funds, antiquated facilities. The administration of Warden Frank Connolly, who was warden from 1890 to 1921, is credited with building most of the prison, including, finally, the rock wall that surrounded it. And when he became warden, this prison actually flourished. He instituted extensive inmate labor project that kept many of the inmates at work, constructing, prison buildings, prison walls, and things like that. And he also provided various state and community services like road building, logging, and ranching. The food eaten at the prison was grown by the prisoners. The prisoners made furniture and other goods that was sold to the public, and all the money went back into the prison. So Conley actually did a lot for this prison.
Right.
He was the one that made the prison self-sufficient. Well, after Conley left office, things just went downhill. The prison experienced almost 40 years of degeneration, mismanagement, monetary restraints, and this happened until there was an explosive riot in 1959 that captured the attention of the nation and what was going on in this prison. Now, during the riot, the prison was under inmate control for 36 hours before the Montana National Guard stormed in and to restore order, and of course, in the process, people got killed. The facility was retired in September 1979, and the inmates were moved to the current prison, which is like 3.5 miles away. But after Conley left, like I said, things got bad real fast. Overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, all of the inmate work projects just disappeared. There were no more selling to the public, no more building furniture, no more nothing.
Yep.
Poor food, sometimes no food at all.
No heat, no air,
no heat, no air, no circulation, no nothing like that.
No
and
doctors, probably.
There was a doctor, but to give the inmates medicine, the doctor had to actually pay for the medicine, so there was little, if any, medicine for the prisoners that were sick. And And the inmates that were considered a escape risk were forced to wear these shoes with concrete soles, and these shoes weighed like 20 pounds apiece. So that's 40 pounds on a person's legs, on a person's feet. Anyway, there was almost no ventilation whatsoever through these cell blocks, and there was little heat in the winter. And we're talking about a place where it gets cold. The guards were the most underpaid in the country, and they were brutal and abusive. Murder, suicides happened frequently, almost on a daily basis, and you had a corrupt administration that directed the money to other areas, including their own pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of all of this and more, the prison was plagued with riots and escapes. Like I said, the worst one being in 1959. And during that riot, the warden and a couple of guards were killed. And after the National Guard come in, there were a lot of prisoners killed. And today the building is a museum, and it's dedicated to all things law enforcement, and it's open to the public most of the year. And they even run ghost tours through there. And you can get information from their website on that. But people that have gone in there, they have reported seeing apparitions of these people in ragged, drab uniforms, like prisoners would wear. They hear disembodied voices. They hear footsteps. They hear moaning. They hear crying. Chains rattling, foul smells. They've been touched. There's been cold spots. And just about every tour, someone reports seeing something paranormal or something paranormal happening in there. And it's just not always one person. Sometimes the entire group will hear it. So this is another place that's very, very active. And like I said, it's open for ghost tours.
I forgot.
If you want...
About the other, when we were talking about the first one, I totally gapped out. But there's people who actually got EVPs, they have photos, and they actually got video of apparitions. Like it looks like a Native American on a horse. And of course, we can't share this stuff because they're copyrighted issues.
Right.
But later on, when we upload this video to YouTube, we'll put in the different links where you can actually find these, watch the videos, and check out some of the EVPs that they did capture from the little Bighorn Battlefield. I forgot because there's people who are actually getting a lot of evidence from all over the place.
Oh, yeah. I think they get evidence every time they go there.
Yeah, I'm sorry I forgot to mention that, but I was still a little off kilter when I was trying to get us from YouTube over to here and everything. And we totally appreciate and we're very grateful that y'all still stuck with us. But, yeah, these prison places.
Another footnote about the Montana prison, one of the things, too, that makes it so-called famous is 2 members of Butch Cassidy's Hole-in-the-Wall gang served time there.
Yeah, we should do a show on those guys. We haven't done a show on old Western people
for
a while.
He was comical. That would be a good show to do on Butch Cassidy.
Yeah, because I think we did like Bellstar and a couple of those guys. Yeah, we got to get back into that. But, some of these prisons, you are going to smell like foul smells still come out depending on the weather because they didn't have, facilities to go into, so they just go right on their cell walls and everything else. So, and that stays in there, just like cat pee does and cement. It doesn't just go away. So different
one of the things
temps bring out the stink. So
one of the things too about this prison, and it didn't work, was that they wanted to base it on a prison in New York where everyone was in a solitary cell, and they were only let out for meals and to work, and they were not allowed to talk at all. It was supposed to be complete silence.
That causes mental issues, dude, though.
I know, but when you have 4 people in an 8x8 cell, they're not going to be quiet. They're going to sit there and talk. I would.
They're going to learn something. Yeah, but literally, because humans are social creatures, it's possible to live on your own and never, ever, ever communicate with another human, but your mentality and your brain's going to go a little bit, okay? Because we need socialization. We crave it. It's just you're built that way.
Well, that was the same system that they did at that prison in Pennsylvania. where all that
Yeah.
paranormal show
Yeah,
went to. Those hunters went
in
to.
San Francisco.
That was the same system that they used there, but that was a bigger prison, and the prisoners were not all bunched up together like they were here at the Montana.
I can't remember what prison or where I exactly saw this, but I remember when they were talking about how they would isolate everybody in these little small ones, and nobody could be next to each other, and nobody was allowed to talk, and they never had nothing. And literally everybody was going insane. They turned into mentally disturbed animals, and they couldn't even correct some of them after that. So that's why they stopped doing that.
I know what one
and
you're
changed
talking about, and I can't think of it, but the prisoners, instead of it rehabilitating them, a lot of the prisoners, not all of them, but most of them, went insane.
Yeah, and they could not correct it, and then that's when things started to change from there.
But at that prison in Pennsylvania, that happened too. Some of those prisoners just went insane because they were isolated.
Right,
and when they were let out, they couldn't talk to each other.
Right, so I think that might have caused some type of imprints on this place as well, just because of those type of conditions and the energy that you're putting out from that emotional messed up stuff. You know what I mean? So
this prison, the old Montana State Prison, was so bad, they had prisoners sleeping outside in the weather because they were so overcrowded, there was no room in the buildings for them. And a lot of the money just went for administration buildings and guard housing and stuff like that, you know. I mean, they didn't care about the prisoners. It was just this one warden while he was there. That was the only time that prison ever flourished, is when that one warden was there, Connolly. And but before him and after him, things were just. It had been compared to Andersonville, that prison down in Georgia, where for Civil War prisoners.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Did I lose you from the storm? Oh man, hopes we don't.
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I thought you were waiting for me to respond to that. I'm like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but no,
there was a big. I have a storm. We have a storm going on here right now, and every once in a while you're going to hear it because there's a big old thunder cloud right over the house.
Right, but yeah, no, I totally get that. But I can see why a lot of these prisons have that. But I wouldn't mind being an inmate stuck outside, because it's better than trapped in a little cell where you're not allowed to talk. At least you're outside, fresh air, and I deal with the weather. But should we move on to the next one?
Yes, we should.
Okay, let's see if I can find the picture. Because everything's all mixed up. But the Historic Hotel Metlen. Now, this is located on 5 Railroad Avenue, South Dillon, Montana. Now, this 3-story sandstone and brick building with a old Victorian tower was built in 1897 by Joseph C. Melton. Now, on that same site, after their first hotel, they purchased the Carina, I think it was, hotel. There was a hotel here first before he built this new one. But it was called the Carina Hotel, and it burned down in 1892, and then that's when they kept the land, and then they built the new building, okay? So there's a little longer history on this land. There was actually another hotel there a lot longer and had, definitely a rough characters in it and shootouts and everything else, and then that place burnt down, and then they built right on the ruins of that. Now, this hotel was built for about $30,000 back then in the 1800s, and
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I know. And it had 60 rooms, 2 bars, a restaurant, and a dance floor. I don't even know what that word was that came out of my mouth, but I meant to say dance floor. I guess I'm getting a new accent tonight. But it was actually kind of like a classy, popular hotel and saloon for the travelers from the railroad, the people who were going back and forth, and also the local miners. Now, the Melton ran this hotel basically all the way up until he died, which was in 1906. Now, the hotel ran for years after, until the later 1900s is when, times started to change. And money, gold and all that stuff moved to the next area. How everything just bounced, miners bounced from place to place. And also traveled to and in Dillon kind of settled down a little bit. So the building kind of went, wasn't really used anymore for a hotel for a good long time. But then it ended up being changed into like low income renter place, and it was restored in the late 1900s. I think it was like 1990s or something, or 1980s, by a local resident who tried to restore this 32,000 square feet landmark back to the original 1890s condition. And several of the, lots of the rooms were actually restored. And I think it was like 50 some rooms, and they furnished it all back with the original furniture and the beds, the woodwork. The front bar was restored, which originally came from Bannock back in the 1800s, and that was made of like oak and mahogany, which sounds to me like really beautiful. You know what I mean? I couldn't quite find a picture that I could use, but I remember seeing it, but we didn't have permission to use it. But I will have the links in our references so you guys can go and check out the different stuff that we can't show. But it was during 1980s that this hotel got on the National Registry of Historic Places. Now, the first floor for many years was and is the only floor open for the public, and it's still used as like this bar restaurant, and they still have like like bands and stuff come and people dance, and then they have like the live poker. They still have live poker, and gaming area was going on for a long time. And from what I read on this one site, it's actually up for sale now, but for a long time, many patrons and guests over the years have actually spoke of having paranormal encounters while visiting this historical hotel. Now, what they're saying is they would actually kind of, there seems to be a pattern or a similar encounter that everybody seems to have, and it seems to be of this young woman that is wearing like this long dress. And now she's seen in different spots in the building. Now, most of the time, people are seeing her because they're only were allowed in the first floor for a long time, was in the bar, in the stage, in the dance area. And before, when some of the rooms were restored and they were actually using them still as, the hotel rooms for a little bit, people were saying that they were often having experiences in room 19. Now, in room 19, from what I was reading, it was said she would, hang out with the guests in room 19, where she actually kind of gives off like this energy where she seemed really friendly and like she was checking on you, like she cared, type of, you know what I mean? Like a doting parent over a kid or something, the people who stayed in that room never really had like a weird negative experience when she showed herself or sat at the end of the bed or anything like that. Now, there is another second female that's been seen around the first floor as well, but normally she's seen in the back bar area, and now she's wearing like a bonnet but a darker dress. Now, supposedly someone took a photo of this entity, and I can't share it, so I'll have to put it in references for you, but you can kind of see her face and her hair tucked up in the bonnet, but it's so hard nowadays to tell, like, is this legit or is this one of those fake photo things, you know what I mean? But I'll put it in our references. But they say this female spirit, she shows herself different times in the bar, the back bar area, or oftentimes like in the bathroom. And actually one of the bartenders, the female bartender, seen the bonnet wearing female show herself behind her, because she was like looking in the mirror, washing her hands, doing whatever, and when she looked up in the mirror, standing behind her was this woman in a bonnet, and of course you're kind of startled because you're not expecting to see an apparition just hanging out with you in the bathroom. She's probably like, hurry up, I want to wash my hands. I don't know what she was doing. But there's also a male spirit who's often seen. Now, he's mainly seen on the third floor, and when they kind of describe him, they kind of just describe him as like a cowboy guy, you know what I mean? He's got like that cowboy hat on, he's just got that cowboy vibe, like, and not like, you got your cowboy guys now. I'm talking about like the 1800s, that type of garment, the dress that they had back then, not like you'd see nowadays. So he's often seen hanging out on the third floor and in the bar area and stuff like that. But of course, people hear the disembodied voices, because you're hearing things, nobody's there. They're constantly hearing, like, different footsteps. There's reports of smell of smoke, cigar smoke, cigarette smoke, whatever that. But you know how I am with smoke. I mean, because if you smoke in a building for a long, long time, it's in the wood, and
Right.
when there's certain temperatures, it kind of, you can smell it really stronger than other days. So I don't buy into smoke being a paranormal Q factor. But perfume, that's more plausible, I believe. You know what I mean? But
Right.
you know, but they are seeing full body apparitions. They are hearing voices of people actually having conversations, and nobody's there. Now, there's a story that occurred in the tower. I guess they used to do like these guided tours at some point. I'm not sure. Probably like the 80s and the late 1990s or something, because the place is up for sale right now. But I guess they were giving guided tours, and this class of students were, you know, going through the hotel and having somebody tell them all the historical stuff. And they went into the what would you call it? Just the tower, you know. And when they were in there, all the windows were closed. But as soon as all the students walked out of the room, they claimed that all of a sudden every single window was open, and no one saw or heard them open. But they opened quickly and all at once, where it actually startled them. They turned around and all of the windows were open like that. You know what I mean? Like somebody pushed a button and everything was open. You know,
Everything just opened.
Exactly. Now, there are different paranormal groups that had conducted investigations at this hotel, and they state that they have captured several EVPs, photos of the male and the female spirit, which I'm talking about that bonnet female spirit too.
Yeah.
And then there's one group that they said they actually have a video of a female apparition floating across the stage towards the bar. Now, these are up on the internet, but again, we couldn't show them because we didn't have the right. So we will put in the reference and stuff. But there is another odd photo that they were talking about. It's like, it has to do with the mirror in the bar. Now, of course, everything's shut down, so you know everybody puts the bar stools up on the bar. You know what I mean?
Right.
And when they were doing their investigation, they were snapping pictures, and when they were looking through their photos to see if they had anything, the bar stools were not showing in the mirror, but they were showing in the photo. But in the mirror, they could see themselves and everything else, but the bar stools did not show. So that's an oddity in itself. You know, so these people, you know, people who were there investigating for ghosties got stuff. People who were there just partying, playing poker, or just needing a room for the night were having, they were seeing full body apparitions. They were hearing things. And then kids who were just coming here for a tour of historical stuff, you know, had a strange encounter. So right now, as far as I know, it's up for sale. I don't know if it's been sold in the time that, you know, because we planned on doing this show a while ago, but things came up, you know what I mean? But this is definitely an interesting place for sure, and it caught my attention. You know, there's so many things that we could pick from Montana. You know, we could do like Virginia City, completely would do one whole show. I mean, that town's totally haunted. Like every single town in Montana, it's got a plethora of places, you know. So, but this will definitely be like another show recurring thing, because we'll probably pick some more from it. But do you want to go into the next one, Spooky?
Okay, the Dumas Brothel. Yes, Spooky picked a brothel. It's located at 45 East Mercury Street in
Not only did she pick it, she ran it too. No.
It's located at 45 East Mercury Street in Butte, Montana. Now, Butte, Montana is a plethora of haunted places.
I've been there, actually. It's
about
really cool.
half the town is haunted, if not more. And but one of the most famous is the Dumas Brothel. Now, the brothel was founded by French-Canadian brothers Joseph and Arthur Nadeau in 1890. And it was named after Joseph's wife. I thought this was funny. After Joseph's wife, whose maiden name was Dumas. Here, honey. I'm going to make you immortal. I'm going to name a brothel after you.
Yeah. How could you? Oh, thank you. That's so special.
Oh, honey, that's so sweet. You're such a good husband.
What's that ring thing? Like he went to
He went to Jared's.
Yeah. Who needs Jared's when you can get a brothel named after you?
That's right.
That's every woman's dream.
I know.
I'd rather have the money that comes from the brothel. You know,
I hear you.
Name it yourself. Just give me all the money.
Now, through the years, this place was patronized by both the elite of Butte and the miners, because there was a big mine going on. Well, actually, 2 or 3 of them at the time. But there were several changes of the so-called madams through the years of operation. But continuing pressure from the authorities, the brothel was closed in 1982. Now, at the time that this place was closed down, it was the longest operating brothel in the United States. This brothel operated for 92 years. Now, this was years and years after prostitution was made illegal. But the authorities in Butte at the time just kind of turned a blind eye to it. After closing, of course, the brothel changed hands several times, and eventually it's become a tourist attraction. Now, there really are
Let's go tour a brothel.
Yeah, I know. Where do you want to go on vacation, honey? I want to go see a brothel.
That's the same thing as let's go hang out at a hooker's house, you know?
Yeah, really.
Maybe we'll catch a disease.
Yeah. Just walking through the door. I lost my train of thought. There are very few details really known about the early history of the Dumas brothel, but in the early census records, there were 2 boarders of the house, 2 permanent boarders that listed their occupations as a gambler and a saloon man. Well, by 1900, the brothel was occupied by this Madam Grace McGinnis, her servant, a Chinese cook, and 4 prostitutes. Now, at that time, the cost of sex in the brothel was 50 cents. And the working girls received about 40% of that, so that was less than a quarter.
Yeah. You guys, this is a history test on brothels. You may be quizzed, and if you get it right, you win.
Yeah,
you get a free
later on.
Yeah, you get a free anything but ordinary T-shirt. Take
there
notes.
You go.
Yeah.
By 1903, the traffic grew to a point where the Dumas' operations had to be expanded, so they built these cribs, which were tiny cubicles where the girls were. They built them in the basement. And they even made a back door so the elite of Butte wouldn't be seen going in and visiting the girls. Life was not easy for these women. They lived in poverty. I guess so, getting less than a quarter. I got so much I could say about that, but I'm just going to stop it right there.
Yeah,
since the brothel ran 24 hours a day, these women would work 2 and 3 shifts before they got any rest.
That would suck.
They were beaten. Sometimes they were even murdered. But since they were prostitutes, not many cared, including the madams and the owners. Now, this was not the only brothel in Butte, but it was one of the 3 most successful, and as I said before, it was the longest working brothel in the United States. 92 years, that's quite an accomplishment, really, for anything.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Nevada has a lot.
Really.
I mean, Nevada still has theirs going now.
Especially an illegal brothel.
Yeah, but Nevada has brothels, and they're legal, aren't they? Or they don't. I don't know what they're called.
They're controlled by the state. Like I would know anything about brothels.
She does.
And of course, birth control was non-existent. And in the early years, so the working girls who became pregnant, they either left, they gave their babies up for adoption, or they died in childbirth because of the conditions surrounding them. You know, they're working in the basement, they're around dirt and filth, basically. If you stop and think about it. In June of 2012, the Dumas was bought by these locals, a Michael Pish and a Travis Eccleston. But however, though, at the time, the building was in really great disrepair. There was water damage, there was a collapsed wall, no structurally sound roof. And the new owners, they planned to have these summer tours for $8 a person, in the following years, and their ultimate goal was turning the Dumas into a bed and breakfast. In late of 2013, they tried to get a loan from the local urban revitalization body in the amount of about $100,000. Now, as of December 2013, tours are still being offered at the Dumas on a limited basis because the place is actually not safe. The hauntings there are apparitions of both men and women. There has been crying there. There is a sensation of being touched. There are disembodied voices. There are footsteps. There's even music. You know, some people have reported music like old piano music, you know, and sounds of people dancing around. And, of course, you know, many, many cold spots. And but some people have reported that some of these hauntings are just like in despair. Loud crying, loud moaning. They say that you just get the sensation of just intense sadness.
You would think about wanting to say moaning. They hear moaning in a brothel. Disembodied moaning. I feel bad for the ladies.
I knew somebody would make a remark on that.
I'm the only somebody here. You know, you kind of... I feel bad, though, but I can see why this place could be haunted. I mean, a lot of...
I want to tell you something. Prostitutes back then...
They were treated like awful.
They were treated like property. A lot of them, you know, like these Old West saloons and stuff, they had the prostitutes upstairs. They were basically in servitude.
Actually, women, period, weren't even ever allowed to have a job. You were only allowed to be a school teacher. Or you had to marry somebody.
You were a
that
school
was
teacher, a dressmaker, or a prostitute, and that was about it.
Yeah, or you had to marry somebody. I mean, you were basically...
Or you had to marry somebody.
But exactly. A lot of these women were, a lot of times, and it's sad to say this, but a lot of women were actually kidnapped and stolen and forced into such places.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, but a lot of them were. Or a lot of them, you know, owed the owner money. And, of course, you know, they were kept in servitude because the money was never paid off. You know, 50 cents a pop, and they get 40% of that. You know, I mean, even 50%'s a quarter.
It's just, you know, a lot of people, it's not like they wanted to do this. A lot of them were forced into it, literally. And a lot of them had to do it in order to, you know, maybe take care of a kid here or there. You know, it wasn't like... You know, they wanted to do it, but sometimes it was only means they had to survive, to even have food or water, to even have anything, you know?
Yeah, or even to have a roof over their head.
Yeah.
You know, it was just, they lived in utter poverty. And we're talking about back where a dime, you know, a lot of places rented for $1 a month, you know? That was a lot of money back then, really.
Yeah, I can see why that place would have it. I mean, some of them are actually forced to have forced abortions because that would take away the brothel's money.
Too.
You know, they were
that took place
forced
too, but a lot for every 5 that had an abortion, though, 3 of them died because of it.
Well, it's not like oh, we got a nice place, you know, come on, give us money, everything's awesome. It was not an awesome. It was nothing but negative for those women.
Even the better run whorehouses, the women still lived in poverty.
Oh, who was that chick we talked about? That Western chick who smoked a lot of cigars. She ran a brothel. Dang it, I forgot her name.
Kate somebody.
Yeah.
Poker Kate?
Poker Kate. Yeah. I mean, her husband died. She had to figure out ways to... She ran
a brothel, and she had one of the most successful ones. Hers was in Colorado, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I mean, there were some people who actually took care of their employees.
She did. She took care of the girls that worked for her.
But she was an awesome poker player, I'll tell you what.
But she also, if anybody did one of her girls wrong, she just walked right up and shot them.
Yep.
You know, no questions asked.
Right. Do you want to go on to the next one?
The next one's yours.
I know. I'm just asking, is it okay?
Let's do. Let's do.
Okay, let's see.
I think I said all I could say about that place.
Well, I think we added some things in we didn't even know we were going to say. But the Bonanza Inn. Now, this is located on Idaho Street in Virginia City, Montana. Now, I've been in Montana. I took off to Montana and traveled a little bit here and there all over the place when, because I thought I wanted to live there. And it's quite interesting, but it's quite different in each little section. And a lot of these old towns do have their own vibes to it. I'll tell you that for sure. But, this inn, it was built during the 1860s as the Madison County Courthouse. And I think it ran as the courthouse, I think, for at least 15 years that I could tell. I may be wrong, so nobody, get mad at us. But, we try to do our best research that we can. But I think it was like a courthouse for a courthouse. I said
a court whore?
I think I said court.
A court whore.
I think I said a court whore. Because you're stuck on brothels.
I thought you did, too.
Yep. Sorry, guys.
It was ran as a court whore, people.
Yep. Hey, we had a hard night, man. Our brains are on fried trying to just get the show going, so we apologize. But it was ran as, that's a new thing. But no, a courthouse for about 15 years until like these 3 nuns from Kansas arrived, and they converted it into a Saint Hospital. I forgot. I think it was like St. Mary's Hospital or whatever for the local miners and residents, which is good they came. They could have blessed out that whole court whore thing and made it into a reputable building. But they ran this place as a hospital for a while. I mean, it was in 1876 that the sisters, they helped like several people, ranging from gunshot wounds to mining accidents, which happens a lot in Montana, to typhoid, to consumptions, and so on, so on, so on. But when gold was discovered in Helena, I think was the next place.
Yep. Helena.
Yeah, that's when many of the miners and the residents began to leave this place, Virginia City, and then they moved, of course, wherever the gold's discovered, because it starts to pan out here, and then they go to the next place. It's just they're like traveling gypsies. But the residents, they began to also leave, and and then, of course, the nuns didn't have a lot to do. So, of course, the nuns moved on where everybody else was moving on because they wanted to bring the word of God and, heal people and do all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Yeah, they probably converted their court whore.
You're just not going to let that one go. This one's going to go. This one's going to go down in our little clippets that we make, because there's always one show here or there where me and Spooky mess up, and then we have all the Raven and Spooky, what do they call them? Blimp.
We're gonna have a show one night called Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven's bloopers.
Bloopers, yeah, because there's so many that we just go back and laugh at each other. I'm like, can you believe that came out of your mouth? But this building afterwards became, after the nuns took off and stuff, and it sat there for a while, then the building became the Bonanza Inn, and it was used for those traveling or those who were still kind of lingering about the town of Virginia. Now, reports of this building having paranormal encounters and claims of it being one of the most haunted buildings in the city, I mean, to this day, this is like a tour town, you know what I mean? And it's still one of the hot spots for, if you want to have any encounter when you're like in Virginia, you go to Virginia City in Montana, not Nevada. You totally go to this place. Now, they claim that they've been seeing different apparitions to hearing things or whatever. But people have told of seeing like this one female spirit, and they often see her sitting next to their bed. And some say they think that it may be one of the nuns, caretaking or looking over them. Now, other people say that they've seen actually this apparition of a nun walking outside near the building, and, they'll catch her for a little bit, and then she just disappears right in front of them. It's said that in room 2, many have encountered with the friendly, caring female spirit, and she seems to tuck them in if their blankets aren't, just right, or sometimes it feels like she's putting her hand on their forehead to see if they're okay, and just like the nurses did all the time, you know what I mean? Now, in the 70s, they actually had a film crew stay at the inn during this time, because they were filming like I don't remember, like this really popular movie. And I don't remember what it was called, so it doesn't really remember. But one of the members stayed in that room number 1, and when he had fallen ill during the shooting, he just stayed in that room and just kept sleeping. And anyway, when he was there, the hotel was empty while everybody was out doing the hours and hours of filming and stuff. And when he was laying in bed, he said directly behind him, he heard like these loud knockings on the window. And when he'd turn around and open up the shade, there would be nobody there. So then he heard it on another part. All of a sudden he hears the door knocking. So he gets up and opens the door and no one's there. And then right behind him, the window started pounding. So this thing was pounding from the door to the window, the door to the window. And then he was just like, F this, I'm out of here. You know, it just kept going for too long. It just freaked him out. So he grabbed all his stuff, sick as a dog, and he went and slept the rest of the time of the film duration in his car. Now, there's also been claims that room number 1 had been locked and unused for many years, and then during the late 90s, the state of Montana acquired the building, and they cleaned up a lot of the rooms, and it was used actually for a while by the state workers and other, workers for who were doing stuff in the area, you know what I mean? Now, one night, one of the female state workers stayed in room number 1, and she claimed that she had awoken to see like this male figure standing at the edge of her bed, and he was wearing like this cowboy hat and a duster, and of course it freaked her out because she was sitting there staring at this man, and then she said that this man just faded away right in front of her. Now, there was another guest that stayed in that same room like years later, and they spoke of seeing the exact same spirit wearing a cowboy hat, but this time it was staring at them through the window. Instead of being in the room, this guy stayed out of the room and just kind of peeking in at them. You know what I mean? Now, many guests have reported seeing windows, doors, drawers opening and closing many times on their own. They hear disembodied voices and footsteps. They hear little kids laughing. They hear screams. People also saw like shadowy figures walking up and down the hallways, which to me, the shadowy figures are more creepy than seeing a normal looking apparition. You know what I mean? Because the shadow figures, you don't really know what those things are, and that just seems a little bit more scary to me. But one time during a renovation of the building, one of the workers claims while they were spending the night that something under their bed was pulling on the bed springs over and over. And we're talking about like 1800 beds. So the underneath is just open. The springs are right there. So it was almost like somebody was laying underneath, plucking each spring. And those springs kept hitting different parts of their body under the mattress. You know what I mean? And so it just kept going on and on and on. And it kept taunting them all night long. Another thing was when they were doing the renovation, they actually found within the walls like this old Civil War buckle and something else. So they think it might have been related to that because it was the same room. And they thought maybe it could have been an apparition that was a part of that stuff, the clothing items or whatever.
Yeah.
But
well, it kind of makes sense.
They were making an assumption, that maybe that's probably why.
Well, yeah.
Okay. There was another worker. When he was doing some repairs in one of the rooms, he noticed that this door kept closing. So he was getting really agitated because he had to keep going in and out, bringing different things. And he was getting really annoyed that he had to keep opening the door, and it just wouldn't stay open. So he's like, F this. So he finally propped open the door with one of his like heavy tools. I think it was like a nail gun or something. And then he went back to work. Well, moments later, his tool, and anybody who knows a nail gun, that's a really heavy tool, okay?
Yeah,
his tool slid across the room and hit the wall that was adjacent to the door, and the door just slammed shut like at full force. Like, when somebody's...
That's when I would be going and asking for another room.
Well, he was doing repairs in that room. He wasn't sleeping in this area. He was actually he was there working on his own for the weekend, being paid to clean up stuff because, But, I mean, the door kept shutting on him the whole time when he was trying to do his stuff. And he put that heavy tool there. And then to have this heavy tool just whip across the room and then the door slam shut like, no, we're clean. This door is staying shut, period. That's what this apparition's attitude was like. And that's when the worker, he's like, okay, you know what? I'm leaving. I'll come back another time. He was done for the weekend. You know what I mean?
I would have been.
He's coming back when other people are going to be working there. So it seems to me, when I was kind of reading this stuff, there's many people throughout the years that have had several encounters, both with apparitions and different apparitions, friendly ones to, you know, jokester ones, and then to one who was just annoyed as heck. You know what I mean? But then there was all these disembodied voices, footsteps, and so on. There'd be people staying in room 1 and another room, and they would actually hear slamming doors, people going up and down the hallway, yelling at each other, and then when they opened the door, it would all stop, you know? So, I mean, this place, like I said, everybody who goes here in Virginia, they're told, and all the paranormal groups and stuff, they like to come here because, for whatever reason, they claim that this is the most active place in that ghost town. But although the whole ghost town is got tons of activity in every single building, which we'll kind of go over the whole town on its own when we do ghost towns on a different show. But this place is definitely extremely active, where it's moving things and people are seeing things, and so this is one of the places I'd go to. Do you want to go on to your next one?
The Colstrip Power Plant in Colstrip, Montana. Now, Colstrip is a city in Rosebud County. It was established in 1924 and incorporated as a city in 1998. Now, Colstrip is the largest city in Rosebud County. It has 24% of the total population of the county. Its primary industries are coal mining and the production of electricity. Now, it was established by the Northern Pacific Railway in 1924 as a company town to provide coal for their steam locomotives. The mining is open pit strip mining, which means instead of going underground for it, they just basically dig through the ground to get it up. During World War II, the Colstrip mine was identified as strategically important because it supplied coal for the Northern Pacific Railway steam locomotives that was hauling military equipment for the war effort. The mine was guarded from sabotage, and the employees were not allowed to quit their jobs. They went to work there. As long as the war went on, they at least had a job, whether they liked it or not. Now, the power plant were built in the 1970s and 1980s by a collection of contractors. Now, during this construction period, Colstrip was a boom town, and of course the population increased. Now, plants 1 and 2 were operational by 1975, and in 1976, plants 3 and 4 were operational. They were operational in 1984 and 1986. Now, in 1990, the Colstrip Energy Limited project started commercial operations located 6 miles north of Colstrip, and this experimental electricity production facility is owned by Rosebud Energy Corporation, and it's a partnership that included, at one point, Enron. Now, the plant uses high-sulfur waste coal from the Rosebud coal mines, topmost 1-foot layer of coal. Now, for the second most interesting part of this, because I know you all are thrilled by now, there have been no reported deaths connected to the mine or the power plant. Okay, now you're thinking, then why in the heck is she telling us all of this? Well, I'll tell you. The power plant produces massive amounts of electricity. In fact, it produces so much that ghostly figures are seen by the workers at the plant. They travel from transistor to transistor. Voices are heard, and the workers claim that sometimes these figures will just walk by them like real people. Also, things will turn up missing and then appear in another part of the plant, and sometimes they will appear right in front of the workers' eyes. Now, the workers at the plant are so used to this that for the most part, they just ignore it. And this is not something that happens once in a while. This is a nightly occurrence. Now, why is this happening? No one really knows, although some think that since the power plant is producing this massive energy, that it's drawing spirits to it from the surrounding areas. Because, like I said, personally, I think this is a plausible theory, because they are producing these massive amounts of electricity, and as we all know, or most of us do, it takes energy for spirits to materialize.
Mm-hmm. What if all these strange things need energy? So like aliens go there and cryptids hang out. Maybe this is like the hot spot for like, this is where ghosts, Bigfoot, aliens, and reptilians, they all come and hang out and have like a big barbecue and be like, hey, let's charge up on energy.
Yeah, let's go to Colstrip and recharge.
Yeah.
But those of us that do investigations have experienced the draining of batteries in our equipment for no explainable reason, or maybe some, I've had it happen to me many times. Or maybe it has something.
You
to
had
do
somebody
with
drain your energy many times.
My batteries have been drained so many times. I quit buying them. I started buying rechargeable. Or maybe there's been something that happened on the land that the power plant sits on, and this electricity is drawing them to the plant. And like I said, no one really knows. They can only guess and theorize. But this is the reason I included this, because when I first read this, I thought, nobody's going to find this interesting. But the more I read it, the more I found it interesting, because there's really, there was no accidents, no injuries, nothing when this plant was built.
But
there's really no other reason for these spirits to be there.
Right, but what if it's like that thing when you get too much energy and high EMF readings? Maybe some of the things that they're experiencing is because it's playing something with
their hallucinations.
Yeah, what if a lot of these things aren't really happening, but because they're working around all of this energy, and I'm sure it's not all safe, maybe it's having an effect on those who work there, as well as those who are near it, because that these high power towers, and stuff, anybody who lives near them, they're affected by that all the time. They get cancer and everything else. So maybe people who are working in this factory, this is just because how when it comes to paranormal, we like to think of all the scientific ways of to debunk things as well, until you can't, and then yep, it is, you know what I mean. But maybe some of these experiences, I'm not saying all of them, but possibly maybe some of them might have to do with that. I mean, I don't know, I'm not there, but it would be one of the things I would think of with some of them, you know what I mean?
Well, it could be possible, I guess. Like I said, I just found this interesting that...
Oh, me too.
I mean, this is a nightly thing. This is not something that happens once in a while. These workers work there, and this happens so much that they just ignore it.
Well, yeah.
And they said that, and they say that they hear voices like there's conversations going on.
I wonder
and sometimes these spirits will be so solid that they'll just walk right by them, and they, think it's another person walking by.
Maybe I don't know, because this can go in so many, conspiracy theory ways and things that people are talking about. But what if there's a purpose why each plant is built where it's meant? Maybe people intentionally build power plants where they're built on for a reason, and water areas and everything else. Maybe there's a reason, because it has to do with, this is not me saying this, but these are people who go into the dimensional things and rips and that. But I don't know. I mean, there could be, it's hard to say with each thing that's occurring, because maybe there's different reasons why each one's occurring.
And this is a power plant that provides a lot of electricity to not just this county, but to a really ginormous area of that part of Montana. And because my personal belief, or my personal opinion, is that because this power plant just produces such massive amounts of electricity, that it is drawing them in from somewhere, because they're not just appearing out of thin air. Well, I guess spirits do appear out of thin air.
Where did they come from?
But you know what I mean.
Well, right.
There's got to be they've got to be in the area to be drawn to this place.
Yeah.
They're not just sending them through the electric wires.
Well, right, but Rusty also was saying stuff like ley lines and stuff. I was going to say that too, at one point too. But there, like you said, we don't quite know the land, but maybe there's a reason why certain people, a government in this ever place certain buildings in a certain area, because maybe they know something more than we do. But like you said, somebody has to investigate the land, what it was like before this. But I don't know. I think there might be multiple reasons why each experience is happening. And I do think that some of it, just a small percentage of it, might have to do with because of all that electricity that's there. And it may be affecting some people's brains and some of the things they're seeing. But I definitely do believe that spirits would be attracted to that, because that's like the biggest battery they can, charge up on. You know what I mean?
know.
So I don't know. This would be a place I'd want to investigate just to kind of disprove certain things, But I definitely, if you went in there for a reading, with your readers, meters, you'd find, all this raw energy all over the place, I'm sure, I don't know. But that's kind of interesting that it's...
I thought it was. That's why I included it.
I wonder if other electricity facilities or nuclear power facilities or water plant facilities, I wonder if they have a lot of paranormal and odd activity occur there. That's something we should look into and see if other places.
I think it would be interesting, if there's any reports of them. But this place, apparently, like I said, this is something that happens every single night.
Well, thank you for picking that one. It's still interesting, and it makes your mind wander on different things for sure, of what could be possibly causing this. But I agree with you that I believe that spirits are attracted to that because of the power that's coming from it, for sure. But I kind of go with my thought too. I think that, some people might not be seeing what they're seeing as well. But let's go into the next one so we don't keep people too late. But the Brantley Mansion. Now, this is located on Hayes Street in Helena, Montana. Now, this was built in 1887 for a Judge Theodore Brantley, his wife, and his 3 children. Now, this 3-story house has a basement and an attic space, and it was basically owned and lived in by the Brantley family for about, I think, 76 years. I may be off, or a few or whatever, but I think it was like 76 years. Anyway, it's like this beautiful oak woodwork throughout the whole house. They have this amazing staircase that just goes all the way up, you know what I mean? And it was during the 60s that this historical building was, because that family lived there until that they died and then moved on, and then somebody else came in and purchased the building, and it kind of was renovated into like these apartments. So like each floor was its own apartment, so like the first floor was one apartment, the second floor was its own apartment, and then the third, and then of course the basement, you know what I mean? Now so the attic was like partially sealed off during those years until the 70s, because during the 60s for like 10 years it was like ran as like different apartments. Then in the 70s, another family came and they purchased this property, and they wanted to change it back into like a regular home and kind of bring back the old house as itself was in the 1800s, Yeah. Now, during the years when this new family came in and they wanted to make it like their dream home, I guess when it was apartments and when these new people came in, actually, they had several different like paranormal encounters, you know what I mean? But it was during the first renovations of this building, which was in the 60s, is when a lot of the reports were coming in, and people were saying they were constantly hearing these disembodied footsteps, and they were often heard in the empty rooms and on the stairs. Doors and windows were constantly being opened and closed on their own. Different appliances were constantly being turned on and off by themselves. Items at this place were being moved or disappeared, like you were talking of the other place, and just reappearing later on, which happens at your place. Sometimes it's the kids, sometimes it's the ghosts. But
sometimes it's the ghosties.
Yeah, but the television, it would turn on by itself when no one was home. And when they'd come home, they'd open the door and the TV would be on full volume max. So could you imagine being the neighbors just pissed off because your neighbor's TV in the other house is just on super blast? And then,
Really?
you know, nobody's even home. So the people would come home and they'd be like, what the blank, you know, and then have to go unplug the TV and whatever. But, you know, all the lights were constantly being turned on when nobody was home. Items were floating across the room and being dropped to the floor right in front of the people when they were there. Even this plant, when it supposedly, okay, in the basement, I don't know if this is a real story or not, but we share it. It's up to you guys to believe what you want. But this plant flew across in the living room, like floated, like somebody was carrying it, and the renter was down there. And then they dropped the plant. And then later on, they said, I don't even know if this guy's stoned, if it's a true story or not. But then the vacuum cleaner supposedly turned on by itself. And then it was pushed around by some unseen entity. True story, made up, or the person on drugs, I don't know. I mean, maybe one ghost dropped...
That's the only way my vacuum cleaner would work.
Maybe one ghost dropped the plant.
Or get used, I should say.
One ghost probably dropped the plant. The other ghost was like, what the hell, dude? And then goes and cleans up the mess.
I just cleaned that, and you dropped a plant on it.
Yeah, that's rude. Don't do that. But,
I know.
They think the reason why they were hearing the disembodied footsteps often in the attic was because the judge had that as like his study, which we would call now our computer rooms, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he would constantly pace back and forth up there when he was alive. Now, they did find like this false wall found in one of the closets when they were renovating, and there was actually this staircase that led up to the attic. So that's why they were hearing like footsteps going up and down on the other side of their wall.
They probably thought something was in the wall.
Yeah. But they didn't even know that there was a secret passage there until they, ripped apart the wall and that stuff. But, so they think it's probably him because he was constantly, pacing from what the family and people were telling, that they remember him constantly back and forth working, because he worked late hours. He wouldn't come home till late, till all the family was sleeping, his kids and his wife. So oftentimes, he would come in, go up the steps, check every door, every level, check on all his kids and stuff, and open and shut doors and stuff, and then go up into the attic. Well, this is exactly what everybody would hear almost nightly or often, is that same path. So is it him still doing it, or if it's just an imprint of his energy of him doing such a pattern that he used to always do? But, when this entity was doing it, like when I told you about the family who came to renovate it from the apartments back into a house, when they were doing that, they actually heard the front door open, the wife and the children, I don't know who the dad was, they heard the front door open, they heard the footsteps go up the stairs, go to every single door, they heard each door open, and then they hear the door close, and this thing would move all the way to each one. And they actually came out and witnessed part of the act of this thing doing this. And there was nobody in sight, but they would see and hear this occurring. So, of course, that kind of freaked them out, the mom and the kids or whatever. But everybody to this day thinks it was probably the judge just checking on his kids and his family and stuff. But right now, it's currently owned by a private party. So this isn't a place where you can go and say, hey, can me and my group come and do an investigation here? This is just something that I thought was kind of interesting because it is a beautiful place. The inside's just amazing. But everybody who's ever stayed here they all had shared a story on the internet that they have this experience, and it's still, I guess, going on to this day, that same activity. So to me, I wonder if this is one of those, except for the plant being thrown on the ground, if that happened. But as far as the footsteps, the door opening, closing and stuff, I wonder if that would be one of those things that you consider residual. And not actually an entity.
I don't
in
know
itself
if the
staying
deal
there.
in the attic is, well, the footsteps in the attic might be residual. Maybe there is residual, but if they're physically moving something, that's not residual.
Oh, well,
so.
Yeah. But if not everybody saw it happening, they would always hear it.
Well, that's true, but if there's doors opening and closing, then that's not residual. That is something that is interacting with them.
Yeah, but I still thought that was kind of I liked
Oh, it is.
The vibe of it, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
We're doing these big places, but I also want people to know that there's actually many residential places that are extremely active. It's not just hotels and prisons and stuff where it should be.
Houses.
Or court whores houses, but these residences are just as active as everything else is. And so that's why I wanted to pick just one of these random houses too, because I wanted people to know that, it's kind of occurring all over. So why don't you go on the next one so we don't keep people up too late.
Harlowtown, Montana, the Graves Hotel. It sits at 106 South Central Avenue. Now, the interesting thing about Harlowtown is that a lot of it is abandoned, and there is paranormal activity throughout the town. But Harlowtown is an old railroad town along the shores of the Musselshell River. It was established in 1900. Now, in 1907, a fire swept through the town and wiped out most of the businesses. So an A.C. Graves, who was a leading figure in Harlowtown's early development, built the hotel in 1909. Now, he built it along the small bluffs along the river, and the rest of the town kind of followed suit and started building up around it. It was one of the first businesses to be built after the fire, and it was the first sandstone building in Harlowtown. Now, later, the stone became common building material once they found out that, hey, stone don't burn. So, and it was also one of the first businesses to use electricity throughout the entire building. Now, in addition to hosting visitors and railroad travelers, the hotel also served as a community meeting place and a business center. And it was the most famous hotel in Montana, in central Montana, for decades. But unfortunately, in the 1980s, the Milwaukee Railroad filed for bankruptcy and abandoned its railroad lines in Harlowtown. Well, needless to say, the hotel and the town fell into decay, and the residents left to seek employment in other places because business just wasn't coming there anymore.
Yeah.
Now, in the last few years, there has been a resurgence in the town. Buildings are being restored and renovated, and the new owners of the Graves are in the process of restoring this grand hotel. Right now they are not taking overnight guests, but they do operate a cafe and a fully stocked bar and a casino on the first floor. Now, you can visit their website for more details, but they have been known to give tours on certain occasions. Now, as far as the hauntings go, actually, there seems to be only one spirit haunting the place, and the new owners and workers believe that it is A.C. Graves. Now, one of the items found in the hotel was an old rocking chair, and it's been said that Graves would sit by a window in this rocking chair, and he would rock while he was looking out at the Musselshell River. Several times, while they were trying to redo this room and the other floors, they would put this rocking chair away in a closet, but when they would come back to the room, they would find this rocking chair right in front of that same window.
So the rocking chair was constantly being moved back?
The rocking chair was, they kept trying to put this rocking chair away so it wouldn't get damaged, but the rocking chair kept coming back to this window. They've even tried locking the door. They would take the rocking chair, put it in the closet, and lock the closet, and then they'd lock the door to this room, and then when they'd unlock the door, there would be the rocking chair sitting right there in front of that window.
That's kind of cool.
And they always found it. They always find it in the same spot. Now, the workers have also reported, though, unseen hands playfully pulling at their clothes and their hair. And even some of the cafe patrons...
Wait. They actually saw these disembodied hands?
No, I said unseen hands.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'm picturing more of a horror movie in my head. I'm like, wow, floating hands playing with people's hair. I'd be like, what the hell?
The workers would be working, or there'd be someone upstairs, and this is something that happens all through the hotel. And something would pull at their hair or playfully pull at their clothes. When they turn around, there'd be nobody there, and they'd be by themselves.
Yeah.
Now, even some of the cafe patrons have reported someone pulling at their hair or clothes, And when they looked, nobody was standing there. So and this spirit is very, very active. I mean, and today, like I said, if you ever visit this town, you can go and have a good meal at this cafe and maybe have a drink or two or even play a slot machine or two. But maybe, just maybe, A.C. Graves just refuses to leave a place he loved because it was said that he just absolutely loved this hotel and loved that town.
Right. That's... At first, when you were saying that, I just missed part of it because my brain's, tired a little bit. But I'm like, wow. Because I was thinking of, the Addams Family, and you got that little hand running around. I was picturing, two of those. Yeah, I was picturing two things messing with people. But I'm like, could you imagine being the guy seeing these two hands? And I'm like, what? I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's definitely... the building itself is kind of interesting looking to me, But,
Yeah.
Quiet, kitty. Sorry, Kat had to get on the show for 5 seconds before we're going to end the show. But, Spooky, why don't you let our viewers know what we'll be doing on our next show?
I want to thank everybody for sticking with us. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I want to thank our mods, Penny, Holly, and Richard. I want to thank Raven for getting us going and for a good show tonight and for sticking with us and getting us on the air. We've got a good show next week. Join us July 26th, 2016, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time when we discuss strange phenomena. Tune in Tuesday for a show that was a special request from a very young man who wanted to come on and share a personal experience he had recently with strange weather phenomena, and along with another guest interview. 2 individuals who survived near-fatal weather-related experiences. Thank you for coming. Please subscribe to us, give us a like, and share us with others on any social media site you may be a part of.
Right. This is a young man. He's 10, and he wanted to share his story because it's a very unusual experience that not a lot of people have. So this is a special show, and then we found somebody else to come on who had another experience that relates with this. But I just want to say thank you, everybody, for all your help, for sharing the link with people, for hanging out with us. And sometimes things are out of our control, but thank you for coming. We'll see you guys at the other show. Actually, Pumpkin Paranormal, Pumpkin Paranormal, I can't remember what the
Pumpkinhead Paranormal.
Yeah, he actually is going to have a show tonight, guys, so you can go check him out after ours. So, if you want to get show reminders, you can click on the cogwheel on YouTube next to our name and click on there. But also go to our website, anythingbutordinary2.wix.com/anythingbutordinary, and you can sign up to get weekly email reminders there. But and you can also contact us or make show suggestions. And everybody have a safe week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Good night, everyone, and thank you for coming.